Good afternoon, friends. My name is Catherine, and I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator at Path Employment Services. I want to welcome you to our Let's Talk Career series. Just to let you know, this series is a bunch of informal interviews, and they're meant to give you some insight around different occupations and careers. So maybe you're a person who's just starting out in a career and you're looking for a little bit of info or insight into what it takes to get into certain careers, or maybe you're thinking of changing your career. So it gives a different path, because each one of our guests, they share their unique journey around some great stories that brought them to where they are now. So I want to welcome today, our guest is Anne Tennier. Thank you, Anne, so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Wonderful to be here.
So rather than go right from like where you are right now, I thought I'd start off with the question around not necessarily your first job that you ever had, but maybe your first job that helped lead you in the direction of where you are now, or where the path that led to
Sure,
where you are now.
sure. I mean, we've all had first jobs, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, mine was a first job was as a summer job and a receptionist at a hospital emergency clinic, which was pretty interesting given I got zero training on the first day and had to figure out all these phone calls and what the terms meant. But anyway, but after I did a degree in chemistry, and my first job after that, which really did set me on the way, I'll let you know that it was back in the very late 70s, so over 40 years ago, which hardly seems possible, that I graduated with a degree in chemistry. But my first role really was looking at the chemistry of environment. So water, wastewater, air analysis, an area that was not well developed at that time. And it was an area that I really grew to be very passionate about. So that very first job, I was a manager of water and wastewater services at a analytical laboratory in St. John, New Brunswick. That really had a tremendous influence on a career direction because I went into chemistry not really knowing what I wanted. I enjoyed chemistry, right? I mean, it's like many people who go to school based on what they enjoy. I
Mhm.
enjoyed chemistry in high school. So guess what? I guess I'm going to be a chemist. And that's, I mean, it was literally, it was that simple of a conversation because at the time, born, brought up in northern Quebec, and guidance counseling wasn't a particularly well developed profession at that time. So we really
Mhm.
didn't get a lot of counseling. If I had to do it over, I probably would have gone right into engineering. The world of chemical research and so on wasn't something that I ended up really loving. I loved the application of chemistry, so that brought me into chemical engineering down the road. But yeah, that first job was very influential. It influenced me in knowing that I didn't want to work as a lab analyst for the rest of my
Mhm.
life. So that was a good piece of information to
Mhm.
know, right? I mean, because it's often as important to know what you want to do and also what you don't want to do, right?
Exactly.
So like
Mhm.
those it's two sides of the same coin, but they're both really important and you need to listen to what is it that you don't want to do.
Mhm.
And while I enjoyed the rigor and the precision of lab work, it just wasn't something that I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And you had exposure to different industries. Through the work that I was doing, I would actually have to go out and collect samples and come back to the lab and analyze them. And that's where I really grew to love water and wastewater um, the area of water and wastewater. The world of environment back then was
Mhm.
basically water, wastewater, and air, and then we got into some toxic chemicals down the road. But that was kind of the world of environment then, and so that was really my first love was water and wastewater treatment, and yeah, so that set me down that path.
And then you went from there because you said it wasn't, you realized it was something that you didn't want to spend the
Hmm.
rest of your life in. How did you navigate from there?
Yeah, so it was my first job. I worked there for a few years, and just like anybody in their first job, I had student loan debt.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly not the magnitude that students who graduate from university now. It boggles my mind, the debt load that students are
Mm-hmm.
carrying. Um, and I had loans. You buy a car, you buy furniture, you set
Mm-hmm.
up your apartment, right? Because you live as a student, and after a while you think, okay, well, maybe I should just get something that's at least IKEA. And so, you have loans, and you have something that things that you have financial obligations. It didn't
Mm-hmm.
take long to have financial obligations. So after a couple of years in the lab, I thought, okay, I really don't want to do this, but I don't have the training to do what I think I want to do. So it was a pretty major decision. I quit my job and I went back and did a master's degree, and took on more debt,
Oh
more
yeah.
student loans, and worked part-time throughout my doing my master's and so on. But I did end up with a master's in chemical engineering. And that really did set me up in a way that, because my parents were not people of means, they didn't have money to support. So basically, I was funding myself. I mean, they're very supportive in other ways, but they just didn't have the money to be able to support. So all of my
Mm-hmm.
education was self-funded through loans, through uh, some bursary, a little bit of bursary, and working part-time as I was going to school. So from there, I ended up working for a consulting firm for a few years. That would have been, now we're talking kind of mid 80s timeline. Um, and then from that opened up a number of opportunities. Um, Ended up working in the food processing sector. I worked for McCain Foods. So this is down in New Brunswick. I was their water and wastewater treatment supervisor. It was an amazing job. It was so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a ton. Um, and then uh, you get recruited at that time, mid
Mm-hmm.
80s, late 80s. Things were kind of booming, so a little bit different world. Um, but I did get recruited by a recruitment agency who was looking for someone um, someone with my skill set and training. So I ended up working in Northern Ontario, in Kenora, for Boise Cascade Pulp and Paper. So I was an environmental supervisor at that time. So that brought me into the world of air and air toxics and air pollution and so on. So learned a ton. Every time you did something, you learned a ton.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then sometimes you're just at the right place at the right time. And I happened to be on a flight back from vacation down home. Um, and at that point, down home was considered New Brunswick. And sat next to a gentleman on the plane. And I was busy reading a contract for my current job. And I could tell he was peering over my shoulder. And finally, at that time, they actually served dinner on aircraft. So dinner came and we started chatting, and he left me a card and said, well, if you ever want to work somewhere else, give me a shout. Yeah, okay, whatever. It was a guy from Canadian Pacific Railway. And lo and behold, he gave my card to their HR department, and they ended up calling, and would I be interested in joining Canadian Pacific Railway as their first environmental engineer that they had ever hired. And so really it was just a happenstance meeting that
Mm-hmm.
really quite changed things pretty significantly. Um, Ended up moving to Montreal, taking a job there, had a couple of transfers. I was transferred from Montreal to Calgary when the railway moved its head office from Montreal to Calgary in the mid 90s. And then I was transferred to Thunder Bay as the first woman operating superintendent for the railway. And what that means is I was responsible for train operations between effectively Sudbury and just west of Thunder Bay, a place called Ignace. And my responsibility was to get trains safely through our territory.
Amazing.
Yeah, the first day on the job, aircraft took off from Thunder Bay Airport and promptly landed on our right of way. And it's like, oh, I guess that's not something that really is a good thing. So what do we do about that? So you learn pretty quickly about emergency response and,
Mm-hmm.
and responding to rail incidents, whether they were derailments or something like this.
Mm-hmm.
Tremendous growth, personal growth opportunity and learning. So yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. And
Yeah,
what
it's
about your
been
career
fun.
now? Where have you?
Yeah, so after working with the railway a few years, and it sounds like I changed jobs quite a bit, and actually I did in the early part of the career, and this is something that I think is probably useful insight, that
Mhm.
you outgrow your jobs fairly
Mhm.
quickly, right?
Yep.
And so you either can look for another opportunity within an organization,
Mhm.
or you look for an opportunity outside the organization. And just the way things were at that time, I took positions that came along, and for the most part, they worked out. But I felt that, after about 3 years in the same position, if there wasn't something else to move up to,
Mhm.
then I would move either horizontally into a different area or in a different organization.
Mhm.
And people get caught up sometimes. Well, oh my gosh, it's not very long, but I don't know if I want to make that move. It doesn't have to be forever, right? I
Nope.
mean, if you don't like something, life's too short to stick around for
Mhm.
something that you don't like. So that's always been my philosophy. If you like something and you feel that you're personally growing
Mhm.
and learning and so on, then you stick with it. But if that's not the way it's working out, move on. Do it
Mhm.
respectfully. Never
Yes, of
burn your
course.
bridges, right? I mean, you never want to go out in the so-called blaze of glory,
Mm.
because that's generally what you would call a career-limiting move at some point in time.
Mhm.
But yeah, so anyway, after working with the railway, I guess I was with the railway in a couple different capacities. One was the director of environmental affairs for the railway, and then later on as a service area manager for operations in Northern Ontario. I was contacted by Maple Leaf Foods, and through a contact where I had about 15 years ago, um, when I was with McCain Foods. So,
Mhm.
that's why I say you never burn your bridges, because you
Yeah.
never know where
Yep.
those contacts are going to come up. And they really wanted to take a much more rigorous approach to the world of environment. So I joined, headed up their environmental department, did a tremendous amount of air and wastewater work, a lot of community contact, a lot of some government relations work as well. So that again kind of expanded the work that, my own personal development, my own personal growth, and the value to the organization. So you develop a lot of skill sets in that vein in terms of public speaking. And one thing I found constant throughout my career, because there's such an intersection between environment and the public, right?
Mhm.
That you never know who's going to be on the other end of the phone.
Yep.
Could be a complaint. The odd time it might be kudos, but most of the time it was a complaint of some sort. And but you learn, right? You learn how to work
Mhm.
with the public in a very respectful manner, and to value what the public brings to organizations like that. And it was uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable for the organizations. Um, but my job was to make sure that we fully embraced public input and so
Yep.
on. So
Makes you accountable and
it does, it does.
responsible.
And at the end of the day, you need a social license to operate, and
Mhm.
you know, you can get the actual license to operate, the permit,
Mhm.
you know, the regulatory permit. But if you are continually fighting with your neighbors, what have you gained, right? I
Mhm.
mean, there's a sense of pride in working. We all want to have pride in our workplaces and the organizations that we work for. And if you don't have that, it's a long day when you don't have pride in your organization.
Mhm.
And yeah, so then along the way, I mean, I guess my parents had a love of politics,
Mhm.
and my mother was a deputy returning officer in northern Quebec.
Mhm.
Whenever there was an election, she would go and work, and so I, you know, sort of paid attention to politics over the years, and ended up deciding to run politically, as you know. I
Mhm.
ran uh, for the role of member of parliament twice, once in 2011 and once in 2015. And both of those occasions, I was still working for Maple Leaf Foods, so I took an unpaid leave of absence, and you know, they said, "We want you to win, we want you to go, but if you don't win, the job is waiting for you," which was a tremendous relief to do
Mhm.
that. Um, so I didn't win in 2015, and went back to work after a pretty grueling campaign, a pretty exhausting campaign, as
Mhm.
they all are, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And went back to work and said, ah, you know, my mind already was prepared to do something different.
Mhm.
And I felt that it was time for the organization should want me to move on. It was time for somebody else to have new ideas and so on. And I had taken on different responsibilities. By then, I was the VP of Environmental Sustainability. I also had some health and safety responsibilities. And, but you know, you have a certain perspective. And when you're with an organization, I had been there for, I guess, about 15 years at that point.
Mhm.
And I just felt personally it was time for me to move on. And I think for the organization, it was time to move on. So we had that heart-to-heart conversation with my boss, and she said, "Look, we want you to stay, but if you want to go, let's figure out how we make that happen." And so, yeah, that was mid-November of 2015, and on December 31st, 2015, I said goodbye, see you later, and set up my own consulting firm and worked on my own for a couple, 2.5 years, doing things that I really enjoyed doing, which was somewhat legal, somewhat engineering, somewhat public affairs, somewhat government relations. So it was all the things that I really, really enjoyed doing, um, and working from home. So it was interesting, and realized that I probably needed that break from the corporate world. It had been at
Mhm.
that point, gosh, I suppose about 35 years in the corporate world, and that was
Wow.
probably enough.
Yep.
Um, and so, yeah, I enjoyed that. And then this opportunity came up with the Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety. So I thought, oh, pretty close to home, stuff that I know, great organization that I had worked with many years ago, not worked with, but had used their services many
Mhm.
years ago. So I knew of them. So I put my name in to apply for the role of president and CEO. That is it's an appointment position at
Mhm.
the federal level, and it's through what's called a governor and council or an order in council appointment. So there was quite a process to go through, and gosh, I guess I applied in late 20, no, early 2017 actually, and didn't hear anything for 6 months.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
oh yeah, no, not in fact,
Quite the
not,
interview.
In fact, I got a phone call and okay. I actually forgot that I had applied. So, it was just one of those things. You get busy doing your work and so but yeah, so I applied. I guess there were something like 70 applicants that applied. And so I ended up going for an interview, a panel interview in Ottawa. I think there were 6 people around the table, had other discussions, and lo and behold, started working as the president and CEO for CCOHS on April 16th, 2018.
Oh,
Yeah, so here we are. My gosh, that's my life in 20 minutes.
not too
At least
bad.
my working life in 20 minutes.
Yeah, and that's quite the travel you had, like to get to where you are. But it seemed like you picked up all the tools and the skills and that along the way, which obviously made it better for you to get to where you are, the job that you got. Seeing
Yeah.
as what the details of the hiring process was.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it was a very linear path, and when you look back, I suppose it was, and it almost looked like you had a plan, but trust me, I
Yeah.
had no plan. It was just, I guess the only plan was don't be afraid of opportunities if opportunities come up.
Yeah.
And don't be held to something you don't like by thinking you got to be there forever.
Yeah. Don't
Life
close
is
all the
really,
doors.
yeah, life is really too short. You're spending 8 to 10 hours a day at work. It's a big part of your world,
Oh,
right?
yes.
So if you're not happy with your work, you have the power. You have to exercise your own power and change it.
Yep.
And that's been a kind of a simple career plan, but it's kind of worked, right? And
Yep. I've followed those rules as well myself with changing where I was to where I am today. Like this isn't where I thought it would be, but I'm comfortable where I'm at and enjoy what I'm doing and enjoy doing things like this because I'm always learning and
exactly.
Learning there are opportunities out there, even like, if I stay where I am, there's still opportunities for me to grow within the job that I'm in now. So
yeah, and you build your network, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
you're really building your network and getting to meet and know new people on the way and different perspectives.
And that's what it's about. I mean,
exactly.
why just stick in your own little bubble and you learned all these things and have all these tools that you can share with others? Like, why not open that door for others as well? So
well, and it's the formal learning part is only one piece.
exactly.
Right? Absolutely. Yeah, I went to school. There's no doubt about that. But let me tell you, what I learned in school is probably not, maybe a little scintilla of what I use now. I think one of the things, what would you tell people now, having looked back on 40 years in the work world? And we spend a lot of time in school, whether it's at a college level or university level or postgraduate level, learning the technical pieces. It's all important. But somewhere along the way, you realize that working with people, motivating people, understanding the people element of work is frankly more important than the technical aspects. There's always someone who has the technical skills. But if you, as a professional in particular, can't master what it's like to manage people, to work with people, to inspire people, to do all of the things that help people work and help them grow, you're not going to be successful, right? I mean, and depending on how you want to define success, of course, but at the end of the day, work is all about people, right? Because people make work happen. The technical skills are kind of the interesting things that maybe get you in the door. But that would be my advice to any new graduate or recent graduate. Don't shy away from the people aspects, you know, really very, very important. You know, I mean, the old saying, well, you're just an engineer, what do you know about people, right? And from a school perspective, maybe that's changed, but at that time, the time I did mine, yeah, that was
Mhm.
pretty true. You didn't have any kind of people management skills that were taught. Um, but boy, you learn quickly. And sometimes the tendency is to step away and ignore it at your peril, right?
Mhm.
Um, or you embrace it and say, okay, I really have to, you know, I mean, avoiding conflict. That was a hallmark of how I wanted to be in my early years. Oh my God, I don't want to get in conflict with anybody.
Mhm. Yeah.
And now I don't seek it out, but I don't shy away from it either.
Mhm.
So it doesn't. You don't necessarily have to like it, but you do have to. You know, those are parts of the job that you just have to grow to understand and be comfortable with. So.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. What would you say would be the best quality that you have that makes you good at what you do?
Hmm, wow. Um, I'm not the smartest person in the room. I also know I'm not the smartest
Maybe in
person in
this
the
room
room.
you are, though.
Oh, no, 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 no. No, we're all blessed with many, many different skills, right? And
Yeah,
from a
that's
technical
true.
perspective, I would say I was probably an average to maybe above average student.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't, so I guess maybe part of the skill that I have, I don't take myself really seriously. Like I don't get impressed by my accomplishments
Okay.
because there's always stuff to learn.
Mhm.
And
Exactly.
so, and but if you don't, and I don't mean that I'm joking all around all the time,
No, I know
obviously
what you mean.
not, but you know, I'm not curing cancer, right? We're
Mhm.
not we're not curing cancer. We're trying to keep people safe. We're trying to give them the tools that they need to keep safe. Um, but you have to really have a bit of a sense of humor along the way.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. And how would you describe like CCOHS? What is CCOHS?
It's an organization that effectively wants to help people keep safe and stay
Mhm.
safe and give them all the information that they need. And the world of safety, of course, the traditional world of health and safety has been physical safety.
Mhm.
But as we know, psychological health and safety is a significant part
Yeah.
of work. And again, coming back to you're spending 8 to 10 hours a day at work.
Mhm.
So you need to feel that you've got civility and respect in your workplace, that whatever you do is built on a foundation of civility and respect,
Mhm.
so that you have space for everybody to contribute in the way in which they can do it. And I think that's an area that at CCOHS we have embraced, that we have really done a lot of learning, and we're trying to bring that learning out to individuals. In fact, through COVID, we've made our mental health awareness. There's a whole suite of mental health courses that we've had. We've made them available for free.
I
So
know
if you
I've
go to
signed up
our
for a couple.
Perfect. Well, that's great. Yeah. So for anybody who's listening, go to ccohs.ca,
Mhm.
and you know, I want to take a course, and if you just look at the mental health courses, they are free, and don't hesitate to take those courses. So I think we've embraced a lot of different areas. I think we're leveraging technology. E-learning a few years ago was just not something that was common. We were some
Mhm.
of the early adopters, um, but now here we are, right? I mean, everything is done on a virtual platform. I suspect there's going to be a bit of a pendulum that will swing back to
Mhm.
some classroom training. And we're exploring, what does that look like? How do you blend experiential learning with e-learning, and how do you make course content such that it's not an hour's sitting in front of a laptop or a computer or device of some sort, that maybe it's chunked into small learnings, small
Mm-hmm.
chunks of important information. I call them the bursts of important information.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go and you do some practical learning, and then you come back and you do a next module. So those are the kinds of things that we're
Yeah, because people are getting zoomed out, and the social media
absolutely,
thing is
absolutely,
overwhelming. So it does need to be kept a little
absolutely.
bit more packaged than,
You're absolutely right. I mean, I
yeah.
spend probably 5 to 6 hours a day on Zoom meetings, or
Mm-hmm.
we're on Microsoft Teams, so there's a lot of same idea, different
Mm-hmm.
platform.
Yep.
And I find in the evening I cannot do Zoom updates
No,
with my friends. I just
no,
it's just way too
it's
much like
off.
work. I have to. It's got to be away, because it just feels like your workday has been extended to.
Yeah. And I think we all do, right? We are working longer because you're working from home, most
Mhm,
people,
mhm.
and your work mind doesn't turn off because
Yeah.
it's in your house. So it's like,
It's
oh,
very intense, right? I mean, if you think
mhm,
of the work experience in the office, you get up, you chat with your neighbor, you
mhm,
walk to get the coffee. Now I find I sit down at my my so-called desk. It's actually just a big old armchair, because I don't really like sitting at a desk, and I'm in front of my monitor for almost, I might get up and go to the bathroom, but I'm basically there for about 4 hours, have a quick lunch, and then back at it. And the
mhm,
intensity is beyond what we would see in the office.
mhm,
I mean, just the regular social interaction of an office, which absolutely we miss. But now, if you want to have a social interaction, you have to, oh, do you have time to have a chat? And then
mhm,
you have to book time to have a social interaction,
mhm,
which is a very different experience. In the office, you might have, out of a 7.5 hour day, maybe you've got 6 hours of true work, because you're talking with people, you're going to the washroom, you're having lunch, you're doing whatever,
mhm.
you're interacting with people.
Yep,
Now, out of a 7.5 hour day, you're probably 7 hours
7 hours.
and
Yep,
it's intense. Like, it has really been intense. And
yep.
this past year, for the world of health and safety, anybody who has been involved in the world of health and safety, clearly with COVID, we have been unbelievably busy.
Mhm. Yeah.
We've been one of the words, along with unprecedented, pivoting to different platforms, to different tools, to different educational needs, and so on, and going into areas that we really hadn't been involved in before. So it has been unbelievably busy for our whole team, and I'm just so incredibly proud of everything that they've done under some really odd circumstances, because
Mhm.
most of our staff, very few traveled, so very few had laptops, and our staff allowed us to push out software to their home devices. And finally, midsummer, we purchased the largest laptop purchase in the history of the organization,
Mhm.
and
I know. Yeah.
everybody has a laptop now, and
Yep.
so they're properly equipped. We've been equipping people with sit stands, and they've brought their chairs from work, and so that they're comfortable. And I mean, you have to take care of people, right? So,
Mhm. Yep. So, what kind of advice would you give somebody who was thinking of getting into your line of work? Like, is
mhm.
there?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've had kind of two careers, if you will. I mean,
Mhm,
or maybe three, actually, throw in operations. So the world of environment,
mhm,
the world of operations, the world of health and safety, and have a reasonable foundation on the technical side, but really understand what motivates people. And because through all of those pretty technical areas, people people have, that's the common theme, working with
mhm,
people. And whether you manage people, it's not about managing people, it's about working productively with people.
mhm,
And that's a really key part. So I would advise people to be part of teams, to be actively involved, to be contributing members of a team, to learn, to not be shy, to learn from others, through the formal learning process, of course, but there's a lot of informal learning that happens just through shadowing others or being part of a team and asking questions. Like, don't be afraid to ask questions. So I still ask questions. And sometimes what seems to be the most simple question is the one that stymies people. And then you realize, oh, a lot of people actually don't understand this either. So I'm not the only one. I was the only one. Apparently not. I'm just mouthier than others and ask the question. So anyway, so that would be kind of, any opportunity you have for formal learning, clearly, yes, take it. But don't ignore the informal opportunities that get presented in ways in which you don't expect. And oftentimes it's through working with other team members. And
yeah, there is always so much you can learn from other people that you don't realize until you put yourself out there and ask those questions. I agree.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So if you were looking to hire somebody for CCOHS, maybe not necessarily in your role, what would be a path that you would direct them in to get into like an organization like that? What would that look like?
So we've got a few streams within our organization. We've got the, what I'll call the very technical stream. So, we've got people who have bachelor's degrees or master's degrees in occupational health and safety. But then there's a lot of function that there's a lot of operations that go into developing what we do. And the technical expertise is one aspect. We also hire, because we have our in-house graphics team, so we have in-house, and social media is all done in-house. We have a full suite of graphics design and technical writing skills, editing skills, all of that. So there's a whole area around communication. We have a full suite of financial operations. So we have business analysts. Now, you're not necessarily going to know health and safety clearly in the finance world, but those are the kinds of opportunities that are there. So what I'm describing, then we have IT. All of our IT is done in-house. So we hire programmers, QA people, we hire app developers, website developers. So we really have and then we have systems administrators. So there's a number of people who come into our organization having experience in other areas, not health and safety, but directly relevant to the functions that support putting out a health and safety product, right? Because it's not just the world of health and safety. That it really does take a village, right? I mean, if you look at putting one, I'll call a tip sheet, we developed a series of tip sheets that are focused on COVID-19. Well, I mean, there's the technical content, there's the communications aspect. We bring in graphics people, then our IT people have to get involved to make sure it's on the website. If we're charging for a particular product, we have our finance team gets involved. We have client services. If somebody tries to access a course and they can't get on to our platform, then we have our client services people who will help them. So it truly is a village. Get all of that. And then, of course, just hiring people. So we have human resources that comes to play. Does it mean that you need to know health and safety? Absolutely not. Do we want people with experience in human resources and organizational effectiveness? Of course. So this is where it really does. We touch many different disciplines, even though our work is health and safety. What was the saying from DeFasco years ago? Our product is steel, our strength is our people. And really, our product is health and safety. Our strength is our people and all of the dimensions that go into putting that product out.
That's awesome. That's great. Well, thank you, Anne, so much for joining us and giving us a peek into your career journey. It's been lovely talking to you, and I'll share the information for CCOHS on our Facebook post and let people know more about it. I watched your the graphics and things that come on social media are amazing, and I follow it regularly. And
we are hiring. Like we have been on
Yep.
quite a hiring spree, I have to say.
I usually share them on our
Yeah.
path links when I see that comes up on LinkedIn. So I'll make sure to keep on top of that.
Right.
And yeah, but thanks for
Thanks
sharing.
for hosting, and really wonderful to see you as always.
You
And
too.
someday we're gonna be able to do this in person at some point, right? So
Yep. Awesome.
anyway,
Okay.
we'll see you later.
Thank you so much, Anne. Okay,
You're
take
welcome.
care.
Bye.
Bye.